The majority of the world's population believes in some form of superior being or force, which has provided us mortals with guidance on how best to live our lives. Even though the human mind may not be able to fully comprehend the divine, it can generally understand the guidance which is believed to originate from divine sources. That guidance generally includes information and rules on how to behave, as well as information on the consequences of misbehavior. The human soul and human conscience are widely considered to be what separates human beings from other creatures on the planet, at least as far as we can tell. The ability to recognize and try to control our human instincts, rather than be blindly driven by them, is considered a distinguishing feature of human beings. Even those who do not believe in the divine generally still appreciate the need to have some kind of rules or expectations regarding behavior in society. They prefer to see such rules as deriving from some underlying human morality rather than from a divine source. We explore such approaches in other topical episodes of Living Law. In this episode, our focus will be on law as a manifestation of divine inspiration. At the outset, it will be helpful to differentiate between two terms used frequently in this episode. The term spiritual beliefs refers to the general concept of a divine order and divine law. The term religion is similar, but is used within a particular organizational or institutional context. Whether one refers to divine messages as the bases of specific religions, or more generally as spiritual beliefs, their content is relevant for all members of a given society. That content is naturally relevant for the followers of those beliefs or particular religion. It is also relevant for residents of political states where that content is itself binding law, or at least influential in the formation of binding law. In the various Living Law Nations episodes, we came across many examples of societies, both past and present, whose systems of law were directly or indirectly impacted by spiritual or religious beliefs. Those beliefs were in turn based on what is widely held to be communications or information emanating from a divine source or sources. For the sake of consistency and simplicity, we will use the term God to describe this source, recognizing that in specific instances it can relate to many different variations, including multiple sources or deities. In looking at the divine source or factor of some legal systems, one can break them down into two broad categories. Ones where there are deemed to be direct or top-down messages about behavior emanating from a divine authority and source, and ones which are more bottom-up or indirect sources. The latter may need to be discovered through individual effort to be even partially grasped, while the former communications are deemed to be complete upon delivery. The distinction between top-down or bottom-up may be somewhat arbitrary in terms of the relevance and importance of the respective rules, but could be of relevance to actual followers and believers. There may even be elements of both in all systems of spiritual beliefs. But for purposes of analysis and discussion, the distinction regarding the nature of the source may be helpful, especially when we get to the discussion of the interaction of divine and temporal rules later on in the episode. For now, let's consider the purpose and role of spiritual beliefs in society. In the Living Law Nation series, we gained some insight into a number of fascinating ancient civilizations. Some of these rivaled modern societies in terms of the sophistication and complexity of the rules which bound their members together and to their leaders. Our understanding of such societies is somewhat limited due to the absence or relative scarcity of written materials describing their life and times. Archaeology and anthropology are able to provide some information on the inner workings of such societies, but much of this is based on conjecture. Things become somewhat clearer when we examine societies which have left behind a legacy of written materials. From India to Asia to Africa and the Americas, a wealth of books, engravings, monuments, and more provide data on those societies, some of which is still being studied. The same applies to Europe, home to a whole host of empires and kingdoms. The ancient Greeks had a complex and colorful pantheon of individual gods, some of whom were at times in competition with each other. For members of ancient Hellenic societies, it was important to pay due attention and regard to all the major gods. There were also somewhat esoteric spiritual elements and practices, such as the various oracles, capable of predicting, if not influencing, the future. The coverage of early African societies in the Living Law Nation series revealed similar traits there. Same with Asia, India, and the Americas. What seemed particularly important was not so much the exact number or nature of divine authorities, but the consistency and uniformity of the beliefs behind them. Consistency and uniformity regarding spiritual beliefs was the glue which bound members of ancient societies together. So let's start with the first category, where, according to the respective histories, information regarding behavior was believed to be directly communicated from a divine source. One of the oldest known monotheistic religions is Zoroastrianism, which was widespread in ancient Persia. We explore this faith in Living Law Azerbaijan while visiting ancient sites of worship. The number of followers has declined considerably since then, but there are still pockets in India, Iran, and a few other countries. Zoroastrianism influenced other monotheistic religions which are still relevant to billions of followers today. The so-called Abrahamic religions of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam are good examples. In the Jewish tradition, a divine plan was communicated to the people through a series of messengers or prophets. Of all the messengers of the Jewish faith, Moses is perhaps the best known. We don't have time to get into the details of the story of Moses, so our review will focus on the content of the divine laws which are deemed to have been communicated through him. Known as the Ten Commandments, these divine laws influenced societal rules across the ages. Christianity is another of the Abrahamic faiths with specific rules and expectations about the behavior of its followers. We explore the origins of Christianity and its spread across the globe in several of the Living Law Nations episodes. While it is dangerous to try to summarize the main tenets of a particular faith, this lecture format requires us to do so. The Christian divine law calls upon its believers to love God and to love their neighbor as themselves. One of the messages of Jesus from the New Testament relates to a key law and religion topic: the delineation between divine and temporal authority and law. When asked if it was appropriate to pay taxes, given the injustice of Roman rule over the Jews and others, Jesus is said to have given a clever answer. Asking one of the crowd to produce a coin, he asks whose likeness is on it. "Caesar," comes the response. Jesus replied, "Render unto Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and render unto God the things that are God's." We shall come back to Christianity when we get to other aspects of religion's influence on law. For now, we will turn our attention to the third of the Abrahamic faiths, the religion of Islam. The religion of Islam has an estimated 1.8 billion followers worldwide. That is roughly 1/4 of the Earth's population. Islam originated in the territory which today comprises the nation of Saudi Arabia. The divine teachings of Islam were transmitted through the Prophet Muhammad, who relayed God's messages in the holy book known as the Quran.
والله الذي لا إله إلا هو is God. There is nothing worth of worship except Him. عالم الغيب والشهادة. God knows everything seen and the unseen. As-salam. God is peace. Al-Azizu. God is the majesty. Al-Hayyu. God is the all-living and creator of life. So they form some of the 99 attributes describing God in Islamic theology. Actually, they're made for meditation because this world is full of trials, calamities, catastrophes. You know? God has taught man all the knowledge which he didn't know, so that man can survive, then prosper on earth. Alas, man is an interesting creature. Whenever he becomes rich and highly knowledgeable, he turns himself away from his Lord.
Islam accepts some principles and writings of the Jewish and Christian faiths, but more as a stepping stone on the way to an absolute truth as presented in the Quran. Certain Jewish leaders in Jesus Christ are accepted as prophets, but not anything more than that. Islam is similar to Judaism in the level of detail of the rules regarding daily life, such as dietary restrictions and the correct forms of worship. In that sense, it can be seen as a comprehensive design for living. Its main relevance to our discussion here is that it is a religion based on the conviction of its followers that its principles and rules stem directly from divine authority. This characteristic of certain faiths is fundamental in terms of their interaction with the mortal sphere, a topic we will come to in part 3 of this episode. Thus far, all the examples of religious beliefs we have looked at have involved a divine power reaching out to an individual or number of individuals and imparting certain rules of morality and behavior. But in the course of creating the Living Law Nation series, we have also come across examples of religions or belief systems which were more the result of a bottom-up process. In other words, human beings have sought and discovered divine truths and wisdom by searching and reaching beyond the mortal plane. Perhaps one of the best examples of this is the religion of Buddhism. Buddhism has somewhere around 500 million followers worldwide. Buddhism originated in what is now the nation of India, though today most of its followers live in Asia. We explore the substance of Buddhism in several of the Living Law Nations episodes. The Eightfold Path is described as a combination of study and ethical conduct. It touches every aspect of body, speech, and mind. We also consider the operational side of Buddhism and other beliefs in part 2 of this episode. But before we move on to that topic, let's conclude by highlighting a crucial aspect about rules or law which are believed to come from a divine source. As we shall see, the distinction between divine or holy law and that which is created or developed by mere mortals is a crucial one. Not only does it impact a person's commitment to observe such law, but it also directly influences how temporal authorities might enforce law, where mortal law overlaps with divine law. That will be the focus in part 3 of this episode. In presenting any topic as emotive as spirituality and religion, one runs the risk of negative responses tied to either perceived errors in coverage or non-coverage of certain belief systems. Travel to over 100 countries in creating the Living Law Nation series supports a conclusion that there seems to be no corner of the planet left untouched by the underlying issues presented in this episode. So we will conclude part 1 with some scenes from encounters with matters spiritual across the globe.